Okay, so what we might do is kick off. So hello everyone and a very warm welcome. My name is Holly and I'm a senior consultant within the human capital team at Deloitte, and today I'm going to be your MC. So on behalf of Deloitte, I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to today's session, which we are so proud to be sponsoring. Really interesting topic for you today, in addition to a very strong panel. So I do hope that you enjoy. What we're going to be talking about today is the whole debate around equity versus equality and the importance of allyship. And you know, what does that really mean when we drill down to it? So when we talk about equity, it refers to fair and just practices and policies to ensure that all employees can thrive. Now, equity is different from equality in that equality implies treating everyone as though their experiences are exactly the same, which is just unrealistic in today's world. You know, that whole cookie cutter approach doesn't apply to humans. It can't apply to humans. And really, at the end of the day, we're all quite multidimensional in both our experiences and in our diversity. And that's something that should not only be, you know, acknowledged, but it should actually be embraced. So on that note, the panel are going to be discussing the importance of organizations having strong equity programs in place, but also having strong allies and strong sponsors to really drive these programs to ensure that real change happens. So enough from me. I'd now like to invite the panel to introduce themselves. Veronica, we might start with yourself first.
Absolutely. Thank you, Holly, and hello, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today and be part of this amazing panel. So my name is Veronica Skakalova. I am a talent acquisition advisor at Dell Technologies. I was born and raised in Slovakia. And my background is all in talent acquisition and recruitment, but I always had a passion for traveling and visiting new countries, and then an opportunity came up. So about 3 years ago, I moved over to Ireland, where I started my journey with Dell. At the moment, I'm recruiting and looking for the talent to join predominantly the IT side of things. So I'd be looking for candidates for our software engineering teams, our technical teams, so anything within the technology that we might be looking for. And apart from that, of course, we're driving a lot of programs. Diversity is a big topic at Dell Technologies, so there's a lot of initiatives that I'm part of and I'm absolutely passionate about.
Thanks, Veronica. Dr. Amin, we might start with you next then, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amin Sharifi Isalo. I am a lecturer in the Department of Sociology and Criminology in University College Cork. I'm teaching race, ethnicity, immigration, and nationalism. And of course, I'm teaching other modules too, but today it is very much related to our discussion. I published a book and articles. Most of articles I published are related to race and ethnicity, particularly asylum seekers and direct provision in Ireland and refugees in Ireland and other countries.
Great. Really interested to hear more about that research. And Mary, we might finish with yourself, please.
Yes, Holly, thank you so much. Delighted to be part of the panel today and really looking forward to the discussion. I'm Mary Wade and I work with IBM, and I just recently joined the IBM team in Ireland as their employee engagement and diversity and inclusion leader. I've been with IBM for 24 years, but the most recent role I held was I was the HR leader for our expert labs business, which was a global business with about 2,500 employees worldwide. So I had a lot of, I suppose, engagement in, you know, hiring and from a diversity and inclusion perspective and the benefits that it brought to our business, but also I suppose the benefits that it brings to our engagement from an employee perspective. And I just became very passionate about that particular space. So now I get an opportunity to work more closely with it in IBM in Ireland. So looking forward to today. Thank you, Holly.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mary. So we might kick off with the questions then. And Dr. Amin, I might start with yourself if that's okay. So from the perspective of sociology as a discipline, could you please touch on or speak on the importance and the relevancy of allyship?
Thank you very much, Holly. Just in brief, allyship enable an increased understanding of challenges and barriers that those in underrepresented or minority group face. As you know, more organizations are embracing allyship as a potent aspect of the diversity, equality, equity, and inclusion. Inclusion strategy and initiative, of course. Allies in the workplace can be diversity, equity, and inclusion champions by serving as mentors or sponsors to employees from marginalized groups who may feel their ideas and contribution aren't being recognized because of their gender, race, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, disability, or other characteristics. To understand this, I need to explain about some topics. The first topic is discrimination. Unlike, it is very important in the work placement and even before the employment. Unlike in the pre-civil rights time, when racial discrimination was widespread and overt, today discrimination is covered and less identifiable. There is now a nearly universal recognition that racial issues are not exclusively confined to the internal affairs of any state, but in one way or another affect the peace and security of us all. Racial discrimination refers to unequal treatment of persons or groups on the basis of their race or ethnicity. There are different types of discrimination, particularly in work placement and before employment. One is differential treatment and the other is disparate impact. Differential treatment happens when individuals are treated unequally because of their race. Disparate impact happens when individuals are treated equally according to a given set of rules and procedures, but the latter are constructed in ways that favor members of one group over another. Discrimination may be motivated by prejudice, stereotype, or racism, but the definition of discrimination does not pursue any unique underlying code. There are legal types of discrimination, of course. Article 19 of the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination, and Article 40.1 of the Irish Constitution have listed types of discrimination as direct discrimination and indirect discrimination. They declare unlawful to discrimination against a person on the ground of gender, civil status, family status, sexual orientation, religion, age, disability, race, membership of the traveler community, excuse me. But what are direct and indirect discrimination? Direct discrimination is easy to explain. Direct discrimination happens when someone is treated less favorably than another person because of a protected characteristic they have or are taught to have, or because they are associated with someone who has a protected characteristic. Indirect discrimination is when a condition, rule, policy, or even a practice applies to everyone, but has a disproportionate impact on people with a protected characteristic. This already applies to age, race, religion, or belief, sex, sexual orientation, and marriage and civil partnership, and has been extended to cover disability and gender reassignment. But when we are talking about equity and equality, we need to understand there is a problem. Okay, just imagine there is a bookshelf in a library or in a room, and they are giving the same opportunity to two people, to a person who hasn't any disability and the other person who is sitting on a wheelchair. And they are saying, we are providing you equal opportunity, go get the book from the shelf. And the book they introduce is on the top of the shelf. Of course, the person who hasn't any problem can, even if cannot reach that book, can take a chair or something, a step or something, and put under his leg or her leg and reach that book. But the person who is sitting on a wheelchair needs help, needs support, needs someone to come and to help him to give that book to him. So this is equity versus equality. In equality, we are providing equal opportunity, but if we want to consider equity, then we need to support the underrepresented or marginalized groups or people. We know that immigrants, females, travelers, and people with disability have faced discrimination which continue to exist in employment, income, wealth, housing, education, criminal justice, health, and other areas. But measuring discrimination is very difficult. Considering this and the state or quality of being just and fair, we must provide extra support to them before and after the employment. For example, we need to go to the asylum seeker accommodation centers and inform them about the job opportunity. They can now have a work permit if an employer signs their application.
Yeah, and I might stop you there.
Thank you.
And I think that's where allyship comes into play so well. And I think your description of it was really interesting. It's clear how important it is and how it goes far beyond using, a hashtag on social media. So thank you for that description. Veronica, I might jump to you next to see what that means in action. What does being an ally mean at Dell?
Absolutely. And I really like the bookshelf example that Dr. Amin mentioned. It's really eye-opening. So I suppose when it comes to Dell Technologies, diversity and inclusion is a really big topic, and we create environment which is collaborative and open, and everyone can voice their opinion and challenge the status quo and become an ally. So from talent perspective, I wanted to say that we're an equal opportunity employer, but after hearing that example that Dr. Amin mentioned, I want to say that it's more so an equity, because we make our hiring decisions based on business needs, based on the job requirements and the individual skills, independent of any racial origins or nationality or ability or disability. So we're creating that kind of environment. And when it comes to allyship, a huge part of our culture are so-called employee resource groups. We call them ERGs, and those are essentially communities within the company that bring together people with common interest. So just to mention a couple of those, we have Women in Action, which is a community that advocates for women in the workplace, and they're organizing a lot of initiatives, panel discussions on different topics to raise awareness, also organizing various development programs to help women thrive in the workplace and help them to develop. We have another one which is called Mosaic. That brings together people from different backgrounds, different nationalities, to discuss and again raise awareness about the differences and celebrate the differences. There's another one, True Ability, again, that focuses on different abilities, family balance, again, finding that right balance, and especially important in those days, these days when with the whole pandemic, we might not have that right balance between workspace and dedicate enough time to our family. So and there's few more, of course, so I could talk about them for ages, but just for the sake of topic of allyship, so anyone can become an ally by either joining them or just to stop and listen to one of those events or one of those talks or sessions, because we're in a busy time, and so even take that time to attend that event is a sign of allyship. We have a lot of programs, and I'm sure we're going to talk about them later, but joining those programs as a mentor, again, a sign of allyship, or simple things like in the meetings, just making sure that we provide that space for everyone to share their opinion, to voice their opinion, to share their ideas and challenge the status quo. So and then also, recognizing and maybe calling out the behaviors that are maybe not kind of supportive, if I can call it that way. It's easier said than done, but the more allies that we have in the workplace, the more change we can make.
That's great. And I know you touched on programs, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about the work you do, Veronica, with the Dell's STEM Aspire program, please.
Absolutely. So I suppose at Dell Technology, opening an opportunity for all while also cultivating the culture of inclusion is a business imperative. So STEM Aspire derives from our wider diversity and inclusion priority to advance Dell Technologies' employment strategy as an industry leader for women. So the objective of the program is to empower and encourage female talent to, or through development of their skills and building their confidence, to facilitate their education and their career journey. So global studies show that only about 35% of the higher education students studying STEM are female, and only about 16% actually graduate. So by programs like these, we're really tackling that gender skill set gap that's on the market, and through collaborating with the educational institutions and encouraging students to study the STEM subjects. So what is STEM Aspire? It is a mentorship program for female students in third level education studying STEM subjects and connecting them with female role models from Dell Technologies. And again, the objective, as I mentioned, is to empower them and encourage them to pursue careers within STEM and kind of realize what the possibilities are. I suppose from the program, it's there is a mentorship, but there's also other initiatives. So we also want to showcase the career possibilities that the students have within the technology sector, because what you can't be what you can't see. So we want to show them that look, there are possibilities. There is female talent in those careers, and we organize various panel discussions and career sessions and networking sessions with team members from different areas of IT to share their experience, to give some advice to the students, and essentially show them that they went through the same journey and they faced the same challenges.
Yes.
We're actually, just a very quick one, we're actually kicking off the STEM Aspire program next week. So we have a launch event. So if we have any female students in third education that would be interested in it, the doors are open. So feel free to apply.
That's great, Veronica. Thank you for that explanation. I think it's amazing for a company, as big as Dell to step up and really take ownership on a program like this. And I think the success of it really rings true in your description. Sometimes all it can take is a simple connection made at the right time to open up opportunities and possibilities for people that they might not have considered within their reach or have considered at all. So great to hear about the success of that. Mary, I might jump to you next. I'd love if you could talk us through some of the equity programs you have in place at IBM.
Yeah, sure, Holly. Just to say, I love Veronica's statement on you can't be what you can't see. I thought that was very powerful. So at IBM, when it comes to equity programs, we talk about inclusion. So that's the terminology we use at IBM. And our North Star is really a culture of what we say conscious inclusion and active allyship. So what does inclusion mean? And Verna Myers gives a great quote where she says, diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being invited to dance. And I just love that quote, and I think it's very meaningful to share that even with our employees, because how do we do this? How do we ensure that everyone is invited to dance? So we have a program which is called Be Equal, and that introduces all of our employees to concepts related to diversity and inclusion. And it's an interactive learning experience. So just like Dr. Amin highlighted, the various topics such as identity, privilege, bias, upstanding, and more. So that's the basis of the education. We're trying to ensure that every single employee has a good understanding of what it takes to behave, and be equal in an environment like IBM. So we also introduce our employees, just like Veronica highlighted, to business resource groups. So similar to Dell, we have a huge number of these resource groups in place, focusing on gender, race, people with diverse abilities, LGBTQ+ communities, and so on. But it doesn't just stop with education, because after education, we do ask our employees to sign up to be equal allies. And that's, I suppose, where it becomes more than a badge or a class that you take. It's all about that continuous education and progress, and it's a real commitment. And one of our core values at IBM is personal responsibility to others, and inclusion comes under that personal responsibility to others. It's about being accountable, it's about taking accountability, and it's about a committed, intentional and positive effort to support people. And I suppose what I always think is it's not about positive discrimination either. It's about leveling the playing pitch, and it is the difference between equality and equity. So we have to recognize our own privilege and, you know, use that sometimes to lift other people up where we can. It's also about confronting our own biases, especially unconscious biases. And I have unconscious bias. Every one of us has unconscious bias. And I suppose it's to understand that and how that can influence decisions that we make and actions that we take. And it's also about listening to as many voices as possible. And it's kind of, you know, on an everyday basis, it can be as simple as asking a quiet or a less spoken member of the team to give their opinion and make sure that we're listening and that their voice is heard. You know, that we're listening to perspectives and experiences that are different from our own.
Yeah.
And it's also about awareness and just deep personal reflection, and encouraging people, you know, to be more self-aware and to understand how their behaviors can impact others or can have others feel that they're not, you know, seated at the table, or that their contribution isn't as valued. So a lot of personal reflection encouraged as well. Yeah. And I suppose our strategy at IBM is about becoming the most trusted technology partner in the world. And there's no better way, you know, to instill trust than by furthering the diversity of our workforce and enabling an inclusive culture. And that's to encourage our employees in IBM, you know, to advocate for equity both inside and outside of IBM.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Another company who are so strong in the space. Just as a follow-up question, I'd be interested to know where the onus lies to drive these programs at IBM. I know you've got a strong diversity and inclusion team, but is effort shared throughout the organization? What approach works best?
Yeah, so we have diversity and inclusion teams obviously across the organization, and they spend a huge amount of time creating programs and ensuring that we have best practices. But the onus on driving inclusion has to rest with every single employee. And I guess that's the importance then of the enablement programs that we carry out and the active allyship. You know, that's why those programs are so important, because it has to be part of our culture. It really has to be embedded in our culture and how we operate on a day-to-day basis. So every single employee has a responsibility in terms of inclusion. And of course, our diversity and inclusion teams, our HR teams, and our leaders, you know, are really asked to step up and to ensure that they're driving inclusion. It's one of our 4 cornerstones, you know, from a transformation perspective. And it's something that we measure. We actually measure, we ask for feedback, you know, from our employees in terms of how they experience inclusion in IBM.
Yeah, that's great to hear, because I think, you know, oftentimes diversity and inclusion can be seen as a HR issue, which is just so unrealistic. You know, this is a top to bottom business strategy that needs to be owned by all. So that's great to hear that. Veronica, I might jump back to you. So I know that Dell recently publicly announced that one of their goals to achieve or to cultivate inclusion is to have 50% of their global workforce and 40% of their global people leaders be female by 2030. Obviously an amazing goal, but I would love to know a little bit about what Dell are doing right now to achieve that.
Absolutely. So I suppose it is a very challenging goal, but look, we need to go strong and really you know, challenge, as I mentioned before, the status quo. So it's actually great to see that something like this was announced, and that it's actually part of the company targets globally. So so I suppose we have worked on various initiatives internally. There's a lot of education plans on you know, how to remove biases. We have a great training program which is called Be the Change, and it's actually an eye opener when it comes to you know, different privileges and recognizing unconscious biases, and it really gives the trainees an interesting insight into, you know, different perspectives and how them recognize the unconscious biases and how to actually avoid them. We've been looking at retention, and we've adjusted our branding, our job descriptions to be more attractive to the female population. But what really I suppose proved itself to be very helpful was exactly those programs. So talking globally or EMEA wide, programs like specific part-time jobs or apprenticeships, going more locally in Ireland, the mentioned STEM Aspire, or a new program we've started called Reboot. So those are programs targeted for the female talent, and to support them essentially to get into the workforce.
That's great. I really do hope that they achieve that goal. And you touched on the Reboot program. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for that one. It's a great program, and it's aimed for women returning back into workforce after taking a break. And even from me personally, just knowing that there's programs, if I ever decide to take a break, focus on my family, my kids, that there's actually program in place that could help me come back. So as you know, women tend to take career breaks to focus on their children, to focus on their family. And it's not just a couple of months. It can be a year, it can be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. So, and the longer it is, the harder it might be to get back into the workforce. And it can be kind of dreadful even to think about the gap that is in the CV and how the employers might perceive it. So, but yet there is so much amazing talent out there who is just waiting for the right opportunity. So with the Reboot program, we've actually created that opportunity. So we worked closely with Software SkillNet organization and created a program focused on women with a background or an experience in IT, who are looking to return back into workforce after being out for a year and more. So an important thing to say is that maybe their technical skill set might not be 100% up to speed with the current technologies, but there is a huge potential. And what we stress even during the hiring process is that we should be focusing more on the potential and attitude and I suppose the soft skills, because the technicalities we can train, and the program is designed in a way that we can bring it up to speed on the technical side of things. The program has actually 2 parts. So there is an introduction training that's provided by SkillNet, where the students or the trainees get training on, I suppose, working in virtual environment, some of the soft skills, building resilience, critical thinking. There's also an introduction into some of the latest IT concepts, maybe a little bit of an introduction into software engineering and different areas of IT. And after those, they go directly into their teams with Dell, and they start their on-the-job training. They would be typically assigned a buddy from the team, and they're eased into the whole work life again. So it's been very successful so far. So we had 2 cohorts of hires. Altogether, we've hired 40 plus women into IT roles with Dell, and we're looking to continue with the program and already planning for the next cohort in 2022. So
another amazing program that I would love to see replicated even by other companies throughout Ireland. So very interesting to hear about that. I'd like to shift gears a little bit. I think I want to touch on, the topic of inclusion, as it's such a big piece of the pie when we talk about things like diversity and we talk about things like equity. And Dr. Amin, I know you've done a lot of fascinating research on the topic. Could you talk us through the importance of inclusion, please?
Yes, thank you very much, Holly, and thank you, Veronica and Mary. You did a lot, I heard, and well done. Thank you. Just in relation to equality and equity, particularly, I think that if we want to have equity and equality in a workplace, we need to employ people from underrepresented groups and or communities. In this way, some problems related to discrimination and inequality will be resolved automatically. So we will have a colorful atmosphere in our workplace. I mean, from different nationalities and from different communities, traveler communities, and immigrants, and so on. So we need to employ people. Otherwise, if we are in a work placement or in a workplace, it doesn't matter. It is a company, a public sector, or a private sector. 99% of employees are Irish or European, and there is only one, for example, immigrant or one person from a traveler community. That there will be not equality. I have a friend. He's now working, but when he got his degree, he applied maybe 50 companies to find a job, sent 50 CVs and cover letters to different companies, even the public sector, but he couldn't find. Finally, he could. Okay, it is a long story. I don't want to take your time, but when he found a job, he was celebrating that with his friends, family, and so on. They were happy, particularly himself and his family. And after a few months, I met him. He was unhappy with the work placement because of the indirect discrimination. Direct discrimination, okay, you have evidence, you can provide, you can show that I have this problem, but the indirect discrimination is very difficult to investigate. And he had that issue. They were ignoring him in work placement, where I don't want to say the place he was working, but the employees were ignoring him. He was talking, for example, he wanted to ask a question from someone. That person was looking to the other colleague and talking with the other colleague and was not answering his question. And he was isolated. He was the only immigrant in the work placement, and he was isolated and ignored. That is the problem in work placement. So I think that we have to educate. Educating is again different than education, learning maths and physics and so on, or social science. I mean, educating our employees, our leaders, our managers, and our employers is something that we make them away from the situation we have. We provide them knowledge about a phenomenon or an issue we have in our society. That is educating people. So we have not only to educate our employers, but also we have to educate our employees. We need to have training, or we have to invite people who they can teach about equality, equity, and diversity, in inclusion, in workplace. And that is very important. And before the employment, I mean, there are many people now, they cannot find a job. They have a degree in their hand, and they have experience even, they have skill, but they cannot find a job. Okay. They are not only immigrants, but also you can see the travelers community member. If they are a member of travelers community, it is very difficult for them to find a job. And it is the same for people with disability or people with different sexual orientation. We have this the people, not only the young people, but also we have the middle-aged people who they cannot find a job. I think we have to move on. We have to go to them. Okay. For example, asylum seekers that I mentioned, they have now work permit. They hadn't just 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and they have a work permit, but they cannot find a job. Okay. The opportunity is provided, but the first they are not familiar with CV format or the cover letter format we have in Europe. They are not familiar with that. In most of the countries, Africa or the Middle East they are coming from, they found a job through the network their parents or themselves they did. Okay, rather than submitting the CV or a cover letter or having an interview. So they are not familiar with those things, and we can do it. We can go to the accommodation centers and just inform them and tell them there are opportunities for you if you want to work. Most of them, they want to work. 99% of them, they want to work, but they cannot find a job. And we have refugees who they have a refugee status. That means that they have all the rights an Irish person has, but they cannot find again job. So we have to go to them. We have to go to the travelers communities, and we have to connect with them, with communities, and we have to talk with them, and we have to show them that we have this opportunity. Okay, if you want to have a job.
I totally agree. And to circle back to that anecdote you spoke on, like, diversity is absolutely nothing without inclusion. And what we've unfortunately seen in the past are many companies placing, all their focus, all their effort on diversity through, for example, their recruitment channels. And what's more than likely going to happen in that sense is you have this revolving door of people coming into the company, but they're leaving because they don't feel included. They don't feel a sense of belonging, which is obviously the very last thing any company wants. And Mary, I know you do a lot of interesting work around fostering a culture of inclusion at IBM. I think you noted one of the initiatives that you're involved in is around educating leaders. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, Holly, thank you. And just to, I suppose, re-echo your points that people join, organizations, and then they leave because they don't feel that they were included or they didn't feel they had a seat at the table. And I suppose one of the things that we do at IBM, we talk about three things. I believe, I belong, and I matter. And I believe is, really that I understand the strategy of the organization. I understand the strategy of the business unit that I'm working in. And belonging means that, I see my contribution and where it fits into that overall strategy, but also that I feel that, when I come to work every day, that my opinion matters and that I count as an individual and I can bring my authentic self to work, that I don't have to cover up or be somebody who I'm not. And I can bring all aspects of myself into the workplace. And the last piece is around I matter. And I matter is, how am I being treated in the workplace? How are my peers and colleagues treating me? But how are my leadership team? How are the managers treating me as well? So they're just to kind of re-echo on that. But what we do from a a leadership development perspective at IBM is that we do Leading for Inclusion workshops, and that's specifically for our leaders to engage with their peers in group discussions and activities, and it's to help them to deepen their understanding around identity and belonging and learning together about different high leverage behaviors that they can use to promote a culture of inclusion in their teams. And that's really a key part of our cultural transformation at IBM. And it's to give those leaders an opportunity for self-reflection and to, challenge themselves around things as simple as maybe a hiring decision. Do they think they're doing the right thing by just recruiting someone who will gel into the team? Or do they realize that when they do that, sometimes they're essentially hiring someone who thinks and behaves exactly the same as the rest of the team, and that maybe, they're not being very inclusive when they do that. Likewise, are they creating a safe space for every team member to bring their thoughts and opinions, or are they doing it only for a small number of people? So sometimes we clap ourselves on the back and say, oh, I'm fantastic, I'm really connecting with these people, but are they connecting just with a select few, or are they connecting with everybody in their team? Are they creating this kind of culture of psychological safety so that every member feels that they can be themselves and that they can bring their contribution? And equally, are they recognizing and praising the skills of every team member for what they bring? Or again, are they just focusing on a select few? So these are the types of behaviors, I suppose, that we're challenging our leaders around. Another one is around developing strong relationships, and with the premise that relationships are built based on trust, and are they creating that environment for people to feel safe, and that they are actually that there is an environment of trust, I suppose, and that everybody can feel that this is a respectful and a safe place for them. So a lot of self-reflection and asking them to really be very honest with themselves, and to maybe even bring into their awareness some blind spots that they might have as leaders, because I think that's really important, because the leaders will make a lot of the decisions around how we pull teams together for various projects, the hiring that we do and so on. So that's the really important focus, is that our leaders get some additional support, enablement, education around what it takes to create an inclusive culture.
Yeah, that's great. And I'd also be interested to know, are these kind of inclusive trainings and initiatives for leaders, are they mandated or are they voluntary? And which approach do you think works best?
Yeah, so I suppose we don't, it's not that we mandate things, but it's highly encouraged that all of our leaders will participate in this education, and we do actually measure participation. But the other part I think that's really important is that we do hold our leadership accountable. So we are asking, through our employee engagement surveys, we're asking employees for feedback. We're asking, do they feel that they're being treated as an individual? Do they feel that they're cared for? Do they feel comfortable bringing themselves, their full selves, to work? And each manager gets a scorecard in terms of how their team are responding to them. So I think there's a real kind of ownership at a leadership level to make sure that they are educating themselves and that they are creating that culture of inclusion within their team, within their organization. So that's really, I suppose, how we lead it and manage it.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And I think tone from the top means everything when it comes to cultures of inclusion. So that's great to hear. So a few minutes to spare. Dr. Amin, I might finish with you. And I'd love to leave this discussion or this topic with some type of solution. Is educating people the answer to preventing discrimination, or what do you think?
Yes, thank you. Yes, of course, educating people is very important, as I mentioned, not only leaders and employers, but also employees in work placement. But at the same time, it is very important to have people from different backgrounds in our workplace. So in this way, many issues and problems we have in our work placement related to equity and equality will be resolved automatically. So two things are very important. First, educating people. We need to have training in our companies. It is the public sector or the private sector, it doesn't matter. We should have a program or a system that when people, they are going to be a manager, for example, or they are going to be a head of a group, and we have to not just nominate them and say, okay, you are now a manager of this section or this part of company, and you have to look after everything here, or you have to lead the other employees. We need to have training for them, okay? We have to educate them rather than just giving them a position without any knowledge about diversity, without any knowledge about equity and equality and inclusion. So we need to have a pre-planned program. I mean, we need to invite people from universities or from, for example, immigrant centers, from travelers communities to come to talk, and if they are able to teach our employees and employers about diversity, inclusion, and equity.
Yeah, brilliant. So we are just coming up on time now, and I do hope you all found that as interesting as I did. I want to thank you all for joining, especially on your lunch break, and I also want to thank the panel for giving such strong perspectives to the topic. I think it added a lot of weight to what we were discussing, so thank you. That is all from me. I hope you all have a great rest of the day, and thanks again for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
Thanks.